Let me first start by saying China officially denounces North Korea's actions and extends its deepest sorrow and condolences to anyone involved in these heinous acts of aggression. China finds these acts unacceptable and urges the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to stop any rhetoric or action that may further put into jeopardy the stability and safety of the region. China has several times expressed illicit opposition to any actions that put in jeopardy the safety and security of the South China Sea region. China has always insisted in achieving the objectives of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula through the use of diplomacy and peaceful dialogue rather than threats of force. China has worked with the United Nations Security Council on multiple occasions to ensure cooperative and peaceful negotiations to resolve this issue, and would hope that the United Nations Security Council and its members would respect that. China urges all parties involved in the situation to refrain from any further aggression until such time the United Nations Security Council can fully assess the situation and take action. The situation in the South China Sea has now developed into a potential international diplomacy nightmare. Recent events have left 56 Japanese sailors dead and countless civilians displaced and scared as evidence of the anxiety and instability that continues to plague the region. The region can no longer sustain the type of aggression that has recently transpired without spiraling into total chaos affecting the entire international community. At this time, China insists that all parties concerned should restrain themselves from any further actions that will only serve to aggravate tensions on the ground. China asks the United Nations Security Council to consider its recommendation listed in this proposal as a path forward for peace and stability in the region. The proposal will first list past events referenced inside the proposal that resulted in situations developing into the current state of affairs to justify its recommendation for proposed potential ways forward. The proposal will also evaluate the possible council actions with potential positives and negatives added for council evaluation. China will also recommend its preferred council actions with justifications fully summed up in the conclusion for China's official position. China hopes that this proposal will serve as a framework to proceed in peaceful negotiations going forward. China also hopes the United Nations Council will consider this proposal in our desperate hour of need. I'll refer to the past experiences listed inside the proposal as evidence. Possible suggested council actions. 1. Recommend the removal of high-altitude area defense anti-missile system from the Korea Peninsula. Option 1B. Recommend the immediate withdrawal of Japanese Navy from the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea (EEZ). Option 1C. Recommend the immediate withdrawal of the United States Third Fleet from the South China Seas. Option 1D. The United States Security Council should immediately consider the need to resume six-party talks in Beijing with China as its host. Option 1E. The United Nations Security Council should exert pressure on the six-party members to attend and pursue a peaceful path to resolution. Option 1F. Recommend the immediate return of any North Korean citizens to the embassy in Jakarta, Indonesia, for investigation and trial for acts of terrorism in accordance with the laws and customs of the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. Positives. It's imperative in order for a peaceful resolution, the six-party talks must resume. In order for peace talks to resume, the immediate removal of THAAD missile systems and any further threats to North Korea must be eliminated. It is in the best interest of the international community to attempt to maintain peace through dialogue and consultation in an effort to seek peaceful solution to the nuclear issue in the Korean Peninsula. The Japanese Navy must withdraw to its own territorial waters. Heightened aggression has only served to cost lives and scare the populace into a frenzied state. History has demonstrated repeatedly that dialogue and negotiations are the only way to achieve peace and stability. China urges the parties concerned to push forward in meaningful relationships to resolve these issues and bring stability internationally. It's the primary responsibility of the Security Council to maintain international peace and security in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. China offers to assume responsibility for security in the South China Seas region from its newly made islands, and it will insist that North Korea cease any nuclear or ballistic technology testing until such time six-party talks can resume. Negatives. There are very few, if any, negatives to the immediate de-escalation and aggression of aggression in the region. The international community as a whole wants to see this issue resolved and are concerned that escalating aggression any further could cause long-term instability in the region. At this point, escalation of aggression could easily proceed into all-out war. Obviously, recompensation to the states who suffered damages will be a requirement for North Korea. The possibility of North Korea negotiating to reconcile with Japan and other countries to offer compensation for lost lives and equipment will be much higher if the situation were diffused and tensions alleviated. China does not expect immediate progress in six-party talks, but contends it is the most efficient method to achieve peace, or at least stability, until such a time the United Nations can define an internationally accepted way forward. Option 2. Proceed in aggressive actions against North Korea or against China's recommendations. 2B. Recommend additional sanctions for North Korea, adding additional tension to an already stressed society. Option 2C. Pursue an active agenda of regime change in North Korea against the advice of China. Positives. Although North Korea continues to conduct several violations of Security Council resolutions, there are very few positives in disrupting our regional security and pursuing active regime change. North Korea has already demonstrated not only its capability, but its willingness to defend itself as well. China has warned on many occasions that escalating violence in the Korean Peninsula would only result in seriously undermining efforts of the international community to find a solution to the question of the Korean Peninsula. While some states may seek to bolster their position through threats and violence, it only serves to heighten anxiety in the region and does very little for their influence in the region. Negatives. China feels it would be ill-advised to proceed in any aggressive actions towards North Korean regime. Any adverse action could easily evolve into chaos, resulting in multiple violations of international law on all sides. China has always been firmly opposed to chaos and conflict in the Korean Peninsula, but military means should not be an option to resolve this issue. China is opposed to the use of the THAAD missile system and as a means to curb North Korean military objectives. China feels these threats seriously undermine strategic security and they are not conducive to achieving regional peace and stability, as we have warned on many occasions. Military training exercises and threats of aggression have only served to heighten instability in the region and can only degrade further progress toward peace. Several Japanese sailors have already lost their lives and countless civilians are left in total disarray as the threat of war looms. North Korean citizens are already in crisis. Further sanctions will only serve to stir unrest and heighten potential terrorist activities that only serve to further destabilize the area. China is already struggling with refugees from North Korea, and any further strain could possibly require intervention. China is not prepared for a huge influx of refugees and fears any further exacerbation could only result in a humanitarian crisis. Option 3A. Increase sanctions on North Korea strategically targeting nuclear and ballistic missile technologies. Option 3B. Petition North Korea to immediately engage in active dialogue with the United Nations Security Council to resolve this issue. Option 3C. Develop a Security Council resolution to give North Korea a deadline to unconditionally surrender its nuclear proliferation capabilities and cease development on nuclear missile or ballistic missile technologies. Positives. Although increased sanctions on North Korea's strategic industries may reduce short-term proliferation capabilities, it may not slow their overall development. North Korea has developed to the point where external influence and technology may no longer play a part in their offensive capabilities going forward. Negatives. China feels it would be ill-advised to increase any further sanctions that could be detrimental to the populace due to the humanitarian crisis that is already ongoing with North Korea. Evidence suggests that terrorist activities are already emerging from desperate elements of society, as evidenced by chemical weapons attack on Guam. China recommends that any further sanctions be directed and targeted to specific proliferation industries to avoid any further human tragedy and reduce instability in the region. Historically, North Korea has not responded to demands or threats in a favorable manner. Ultimatums to withdraw from North Korea's current posture would seem unlikely to prevail. The situation would most likely evolve into a regional threat, forcing China to respond in order to keep security and stability in critical regions of its sovereignty. China feels the risk would far outweigh any benefits. North Korea is in the final stages of developing long-range nuclear ballistic missiles, and it is in the best interest of all parties to attempt to reverse North Korea's nuclear proliferation intent to preserve peace in the region. China recommends option 1 to the United States Security Council in hopes that it will bring a vote to incorporate all relevant material brought forth in this proposal. History shows that the longest periods of stability in the Korean Peninsula were when North Korea was actively engaged in peace talks. China feels that it is the best and most sound course of action considering the proximity and scale of the incident. China has consistently stood with the United Nations Security Council in its efforts to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula and will continue to support any efforts that are consistent with international law and the United Nations Charter. China feels it is in the best interest of the entire international community to resolve this issue through dialogue rather than aggression. China may be willing to concede that some of the recommended actions of option 1 are negotiable, but only upon re-entry into the six-party talks, where members fully engage in efforts to peacefully resolve this issue. It's imperative that China consider all of its responsibilities to the region and prior agreements, which currently give stabilization to the region. Historically, previous attempts have shown time and time again that North Korea will respond to reasonable negotiations if all threats are removed and conditions are set for peaceful dialogue. On the other hand, North Korea has also shown a history of quick reprisal against any actions that bring into question its sovereignty. This represents an unstable situation that's dangerous to the region and cannot be sustained. It's imperative that all threats be removed so peaceful negotiations can safely proceed. Sanctions must also be an official topic at the initial six-party talks. Sanctions are not an end in themselves and only serve to suffer the innocent and make harsh conditions unbearable for old and young alike. China is in no position to deal with the large amount of North Korean refugees, and China feels it's in the best interest of the international community to open lines of communication in initial talks to provide for the basic medical and sustenance support and consider the innocent in any future sanctions. Conclusion. While it's true that negotiations with North Korea have been challenging at best, there have been periods of crisis and tension mixed with slow progress. Previous efforts to establish a framework negotiation were most successful when threats of violence were not present. By all expert accounts, North Korea would have hundreds of nuclear weapons had it not been for the period of negotiations between the United Nations Security Council and the North Korean regime, establishing the basic framework for success. Six-party talks also confirmed that the research when major breakthroughs led through negotiation led into an agreement in 2005 when North Korea pledged to abandon all proliferation efforts. Progress in these efforts were evident again in 2007 when North Korea pledged to return to the Non-Proliferation Treaty and specific steps were drawn out to achieve success. This research is again confirmed when successful efforts later fell apart due to administration change and a return to belligerent accusations. It's been proven time and time and again that North Korean regime will not respond to threats or accusations. In order for real progress to be made, threats and accusations must stop. It's in the best interest of the entire international community that tensions be scaled down in the region. China believes that in order for real and permanent change to occur, there must be long-lasting commitments to stability and security in the region. There has already been a loss of life and thousands of displaced citizens, causing a strain on an already tense region. It's important to remove any threats of military escalation from the Korean Peninsula, allowing a peaceful dialogue to occur. Anxiety and instability in the region have come to an unacceptable level of crisis. China will accept no responsibility for North Korean actions if belligerent states continue to pursue a path of active aggression against the North Korean regime, nor will China allow the peninsula to be torn asunder or wrought with turmoil under any circumstances. Although our position is in line with the common interests of the international community, it should be in everyone's best interest to resolve this issue in a peaceful manner consistent with international law. As a close member to the Korean Peninsula, China bears an important responsibility for stability and security there, and it's important to take note China will defend its commitments. China bears a great deal of responsibility in the South China Seas region and intends to protect its interests in accordance with prior commitments that have shaped the region. China takes seriously its responsibility for stability and security in the region and hopes the international community would take seriously this offer for China to mediate this highly complex and sensitive question of the North Korean Peninsula. China would also recommend that issues of human rights not be considered and should be omitted in any six-party talks. Issues regarding the Korean Peninsula are very complex and sensitive and should be addressed in such a nature. China feels the situation is complicated enough without adding additional strain on negotiations. China also feels that there could be a growing attempt to complicate and politicize matters, making negotiations impossible. China feels the discussion of human rights and negotiations with the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea will only serve to complicate issues and prevent successful negotiation for the framework of the six-party talks. China also feels the framework for the six-party talks should include a path to a real treaty. Historically, the armistice between the United States and the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea has only served to be a flimsy mechanism that has time and time again came into question. The United States and North Korea should seek a long-lasting and more stable peace between them. Should the United Nations Security Council choose not to consider the recommendations of this proposal, China will have no choice but to consider the safety and stability of its own sovereign entity in lieu of the proximity and any potential threats or of aggression in the Korean Peninsula. China will consider any acts or policies to induce regime change a violation of the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance between the People's Republic of China and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and will act in the region for the best interest to protect and guard the security of the two peoples and to provide for the fundamental interests of both parties. China has always expressed illicit opposition to proliferation and nuclear weapons capability in the Korean Peninsula and will continue to support the United Nations Security Council in its efforts to peacefully resolve this issue, so long as it is consistent with international law. China has and will continue to make every effort to work with the international community and will continue to take a responsible approach in coordinating with all parties concerned and hope to continue to play an active and constructive role in the lasting stability and peace in the Korean Peninsula. It's China's hope that the United Nations consider this proposal and work with the international community to resolve this question in the Korean Peninsula so we may all prosper and live in peace together.